Hello and welcome to Archetype Builds, where usually we take an archetype, kind of a paragon from fantasy or fiction, and show you how to play it in your Dungeons & Dragons character in 5th edition. But today we are going to start on the path of analyzing OneD&D, not from a playtest perspective, but from a kind of player build perspective. And the thing I wanted to start with here is the Druid. I actually think it is a pretty safe bet that they will not be going back to templates for the Druid Wildshape. And I think that as a result, the beast snap blocks are here to stay. And the restrictions that they put in are very interesting. And I strongly suspect that they are going to keep most of these restrictions the same. Essentially, the goal is that they are going to take away the HP, right, from most forms. So they're going to take away the survivability that Wildshape offers you, and then they're going to give you in exchange that you get to keep your own, AC and a bunch of your features and cast spells while in Wildshape and all that. Now, if you are building around using the new Wildshape for combat, you're probably choosing a Moon Druid, which has different rules for their Wildshape, which makes your choice of beast even more unique. Here's what I want to do. I want to go through what these new restrictions are, what they're going to mean for selecting your Wildshape form, and which forms from the currently published materials are going to be best from levels 1 through 20. Let's go. Alright, throwing up on the screen in 5 seconds are the new rules for Wildshape. It says, while in form, you retain your personality, memories, ability to speak, and the following rules apply. Your game statistics are replaced by the statistics of the beast, but you retain your hit points, hit dice, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, class features, species traits, languages, and feats. You also retain your skill and saving throw proficiencies, and you use your proficiency bonus for them, in addition to gaining those of the creature. You can't cast spells. Transforming doesn't break your concentration on spells, and then you can handle objects according to the Wildshape's form. So what this tells us is we are getting to port over a bunch of our character features into this Wildshape form, right? And when we say the statistics are replaced, we're kind of looking at the strength, the constitution, the dexterity, and the traits, the attacks, the kind of like strange, like web walking or amphibious or whatever else we get from our beast. When we look at the Moon Druid, however, they have even more piled on in terms of unique rules for Wildshape. We read, when you assume a Wildshape form, compare the beast's AC to your AC. You may use whichever AC is higher. We'll stop there and say, generally speaking, the ACs of almost all the beasts I looked at are less than 17. I mean, you really gotta look to get an AC like 16 on a beast. For a player character, that is no trouble at all. You grab yourself some half plate or whatever and have a decent dexterity, you're gonna have a 17 no problem. So in almost every single case, you're using your AC and you don't care about the beast's AC. Then it says, temporary hit points. When you assume a Wildshape form, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to the form's hit points, or 3 times your Druid level, whichever number is lower. And that's important, lower. So what this is doing is it creates a ceiling on the hit points you get from your Wildshape. No matter how many hit points your Wildshape form has, you're going to hit this ceiling of 3 times your Druid level. Now, I've gone through all of the published beast statistics, and let me tell you, 3 times your Druid level will be your temporary hit points. It is impossible to find a series of beasts that takes you from 1 to 20 with lower hit points than 3 times your Druid level for that appropriate CR. Impossible. It's, in many, many cases, everything is more than double this number. So, generally speaking, you do not care about the hit points of the beast you're turning into. What this means is, you might care about the Constitution score for the purposes of your concentration saving throw, and for other Constitution saves that you're forced to make, but you really don't care about the hit points, you don't care about the AC, you don't care about the wisdom, the charisma, the intelligence, you don't care about so much from this beast stat block. What does that leave us with? Basically the damage and the traits. And since you've already got your feats and your, everything else being ported over from your character, and you're even casting abjuration spells sometimes, you're generally speaking not going to need a ton of these traits. So what we're looking at is essentially who has the best damage. Now, a quick glance through the CR1 beasts in published materials reveals a clear winner for damage. And I actually wondered whether this was like a mistake. So I started alphabetically with the Awakened Brown Bear, and then second with the Brown Bear, which have the exact same statistics. And then I did all of the CR1 beasts, and there are a bunch of them, and the Awakened Brown Bear has the highest damage by far. Felt so great when I did this analysis. The reason why is because this creature is benefiting from multi-attack, which none of the other CR1 beasts that have any relevance are getting. Remember, you can't use a fly speed at this level, so even though there are some creatures with a fly speed, they're not relevant to us until level 8 as a druid, at which point we've moved on from CR1. So I strongly recommend the Brown Bear for your level 3, 4, and 5 time as a Moon Druid. This is going to give you, against like an AC of 15, 11.7 DPR, because you've got that multi-attack. One very tempting runner-up is actually going to be the Clawfoot. The Clawfoot doesn't have as high DPR on a flat roll, but it does have pack tactics, which is going to give you advantage in a lot of cases, which does bring it over the Brown Bear. You also are going to get Pounce, so on the first turn of combat, you're probably going to get an extra attack in at advantage with the Pounce ability. This brings your damage way up, and I don't know why, but it kind of like scratches an itch in my brain. The Brown Bear's got 34 hit points, and obviously you're getting 9, 12, and 15 temporary hit points, so that's like a lot of wasted HP. The Clawfoot's only got 19, so it's actually the closest that you can get to, the temporary hit points that you're actually going to be receiving. When we move up to looking at CR2 creatures, it gets a little bit more competitive. The Auroch is a pretty heavy damage dealer, all things considered, and it's got this ability where it's adding damage whenever you move 20 feet to a target. I factored that extra damage in when I was analyzing these creatures, figuring that if you were in melee with a creature, you could always run out and run back, maybe taking that opportunity attack. It's not always a guarantee, which I will admit. There are other creatures like the giant elk where when I factor in this damage, it does comparative numbers. The other thing you can look at is the polar bear, which is only about 1.3 DPR shy of the Auroch, factoring in their charge bonus. But the polar bear is getting that just from having multi-attack, and they get a swim speed as well, right? So that's kind of nifty, and that restriction is lifted, right, from Moon Druids. There's no swim speed restriction. So maybe a bear-based druid is what you want to do, right? Go brown bear into polar bear, I think would be a pretty good option. Real quick, there are a bunch of beasts that essentially have some kind of knock you prone ability, and of course, if you knock your enemy prone, then your attacks are going to be at advantage. This is going to overly benefit creatures with a low plus to hit, but to be honest, Wizards kind of standardizes that amongst all of these creatures. Almost everyone is operating with either a +5 or +6 to hit, or at CR2. So having advantage will benefit everyone almost the exact same amount, so I didn't really pay too much attention, although some have that ability and some don't. For instance, the Allosaurus has it, the giant boar has it, the giant elk has it, the rhinoceros has it, the boulette, the tiger, but the polar bear, for instance, doesn't, and I just recommended the polar bear as our #1 option. So try and figure out if you're going up against creatures that are likely to fail a very low strength saving throw to be knocked prone. If you're up against really weak targets, it's possible that a different one on this list will benefit more from knocking them prone and getting advantage on those attacks. Moving up to CR3, I think there is a very clear winner here, and that is the Giant Scorpion. The Giant Scorpion has the distinction of being the only creature that has 3 attacks when they take the attack action, with their claws and with their tail. A lot of their damage is hinging on the tail hitting and your enemy failing that Constitution saving throw. I calculated this as if your opponent was adding 3 to their Constitution save. That's not a super mathematical analysis, but I think generally speaking, most creatures have at least a +1 to their Constitution, and some have proficiency. So a +3 seems like an okay estimate. Even in this case, your poison damage is so high that it is worth considering, unless you're up against opponents who are immune to poison in some way. To balance out having a 3 attacks in one turn, the Giant Scorpion has only a +4 to hit with these abilities, which is the lowest of anything at CR3, which means they'll benefit the most from having advantage, and their claws can grapple a target. If you can find some way to get advantage that doesn't come from your beast form and instead comes from like feats or teammates or something else like that, the Giant Scorpion is going to benefit a lot from that. In addition, it's got blind sight, which is probably going to come up more often than you would think. I want to give a shout out to 2 runners-up in the CR3 category. The Amphisbena has pretty solid damage with their Constrict ability, and obviously that is going to shut down an enemy, right? We're going to have the restrained condition, which is great. And then I also wanted to give a shout out to the Bristled Moormunder, whose damage is pretty good. It's higher than the snake, it's just shy of the scorpion, but they've also got Bladed Hide, which potentially does damage to people who attack them. So if your job as the tank is to like get hit a bunch of times with those temporary hit points, this might outperform in DPR. Could be. And it's also got Standing Leap, which is useful mobility. At Druid level 12, you're going to get access to CR4 forms. And this one also has a pretty clear winner from my standpoint. There is a giant subterranean lizard, which is admittedly from Tales from the Yawning Portal, which maybe your DM will or will not allow, but I had to give the recommendation here. The giant subterranean lizard is going to get 2 attacks. One includes a bite attack, which, if it hits, automatically grapples the target. Then you are allowed to immediately swallow, which is just going to happen to a grappled target and do a bunch of additional damage, including some acid damage which occurs at the start of their turn. So if you miss that bite, it's a big problem for you, but if you just apply the normal math of plus to hit against an AC and factor in all the damage that comes from that bite, it's enormous. Like, you'll really wreck someone's day. This has got to be against a medium or smaller creature, but if you're up against medium or smaller creatures, the lizard outperforms all the other forms for damage, but in many cases doubling the damage that other forms of the same CR get. And again, you don't care about the AC or the HP or any of that. So this is a really great option. It's also got a 50-foot swim speed, which is could be useful. Who knows? These pickings were a little bit slimmer. So you're going to go from a 35 expected DPR against a medium creature with an AC of 15 to next best being 20 with the giant walrus. So we're already down huge percent. From there, your third best at this level is the Stegosaurus at 16. So quite a steep drop off. And again, 16 is lower than the Scorpion from last round. So you might be better off with a CR3 rather than using a CR4 if your DM takes Giant Subterranean Lizard off the table. At CR5, things get a little bit more competitive in the DPR department. Your highest DPR is going to come from the Hulking Crab, which is making 2 claw attacks and potentially grappling your target. They're going to have 26 average output damage, which is lower than the Subterranean Lizard was going to get against a medium target. So it's possible you don't want to use a CR5 form when you get access to them at 15th level. The hulking crab is also going to get shell camouflage and amphibious for whatever it is worth. And then your next best is going to be a tie at this CR between the elder giant lizard and the giant crocodile. Giant crocodile being probably from the more common book. That's going to be a 24.5 DPR against the targets we've described, and they do get, the amphibious, and they get to grapple people with that bite, which is nice. I will say that honorable mention to the Triceratops, which has pretty low DPR, but it has the charge ability to knock someone prone. If you knock them prone, you get that extra stomp attack, which would be significant damage in that turn. Again, that's going to depend on your opponent failing a pretty doable strength save. Just wanted to throw that out there. Finally, at CR6, there is only one beast, and this is going to take you from 18th level all the way through 20th. The Mammoth is the only beast on the list with a DPR against a creature with an AC of 15 of just 20, which means it's worse than CR5, worse than CR4, and just tying the Giant Scorpion, the CR3. Since we don't care about the HP, even at 20th level, 3 times our Druid level is 60, which is less HP than any CR5 or any CR4, and just a little bit higher than the Giant Scorpion at CR3. So the only options you get access to at 18th, 19th, and 20th level are worse than the options that you had access to at 9th level. So you're generally speaking going to continue with the hulking crab. The best beast on this entire list was the subterranean lizard against medium targets, and you unlock that at 12th level. I think it's worthwhile to point out here that this is probably overall a really significant nerf to the Moon Druid. The HP scaling that you're going to have with that floor is pretty terrible with the temporary hit points being added. You can convert your spells into Wildshapes now, which is going to allow you to more consistently be in Wildshape form, but I think everyone would agree that 20 damage per round is not super competitive for like 12th level play, and like that's probably competitive prior to 5th level, but prior to 6th level you're working with CR2s, so that's with the Auroch with 15 DPR. So you're not doing great damage. You're doing fine damage. You're not doing great damage, and your HP bonus is pretty poor overall. It's nice that you can do it more often, but it's not a very big bonus. So what is the Moon Druid really getting? Sound off in the comments below. I think this is actually kind of slept on as like a really bad class now. The thing that it would let you do is the thing that all the druids could do, which is like take a spider for like spider climb or something, or at 8th level you can get a flying speed, which would be nice, and then you can fly. But that's just like your general utility wild shape, right? For combat purposes, your damage, you'd be better off in a lot of cases doing cantrips, or like casting a single concentration spell and then layering cantrips on top of that. Like, you don't need to use the wild shape form other than for temporary hit points, which, let's say you do 2 per combat at 5th level, so you're getting 15 plus 15, 30 additional hit points. 30 additional hit points is good. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, that's nice. But in exchange, you're not casting spells, and you've got to use your wild shape statistics. So, I don't know. I actually kind of think maybe the Moon Druid is not a good class now. That's my analysis. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what beast forms you would prefer to do this with, or what seems like it would be good to use at your table.